March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was a large step towards gaining the laws that gave equal rights to all.
Even with these laws in place, there is still not full equality in the past, and there still isn't full equality in the present.
For decades, African Americans were treated unfairly. They were beaten, thrown in jail, and violently punished.
In 1941, Asa Philip Randolph had made plans for the first March on Washington. It was designed to give equal job opportunities in World War II.
However, it was later called off by Randolph after Roosevelt made a deal with him to give more opportunities in the war to African Americans.
Even with this small win, there was still injustice in the daily lives of African Americans.
Injustices might consist of the inability to vote, segregation in public areas, and unequal education and job opportunities. The African Americans fought against these corruptions one small step at a time with peaceful, nonviolent acts.
Some of the acts they did were the Montgomery bus boycott, the Youth March for Integrated School, and some smaller acts of resistance.
These acts fought small, specific inequalities, but not full equality as a whole.
But they needed something bigger. They needed something that would fight for all equality, for everyone, in a nonviolent, peaceful manner.
So they planned the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It was all planned to happen on August 28, 1963.
The largest movement in the fight for equal rights. On the day of the march, hundreds of thousands of people showed up.
The march attendants walked from the Washington Memorial to the Lincoln Memorial, a 1.9-mile walk that ended up taking about 2 hours.
The march was finished by the famous Martin Luther King Jr. and his equally famous I Have a Dream speech.
The night before the march, King and his friends got together to finish writing the I Had a Dream speech. Midway through the speech, he put his script down.
The I Have a Dream speech is most famous for the ending, in which it was named after.
This is when he began talking about his dreams. He talked about how bright the future could be and about how he wished his children would be treated as equals.
My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
He made the most impressive speech of the decade off the top of his head.
His speech inspired many African Americans and created new ideas for the world. Many talented artists, speakers, and actors performed at the March on Washington, such as Ruby Dee, Bayard Rustin, Mahalia Jackson, A. Philip Randolph, Bob Dylan, and Joanne Baez. Those performers weren't the only ones who helped with the march. The 310,000 people that came also helped.
As well as people who helped plan it, such as Bayard Rustin, the chief organizer, Whitney Young Jr., and James Farmer.
The march was a success. On March 22, 1972, the Equal Rights Amendment was passed in the U.S. Senate.
Even though those laws were in place, there was still not full equality in the 1900s. The African American unemployment rate was 11%, unlike the 5% unemployment rate of whites.
Even in 2003, the 40th anniversary of the march, the African American unemployment rate was still high at 10.2%.
The African Americans that do have jobs are paid less than whites, and African American women have a very hard time, with even less pay than African American men.
A study shows that African American men get paid 26% less than white men in the UK between 2014 and 2017.
Same study says that African American women were paid 28% less than white men in the UK between 2014 and 2017.
This study also shows there is a difference in more than just how people look and think about others, but how their thoughts are affecting the daily lives of African Americans.
People experienced effects outside of work and pay as well, but in more excessive and brutal ways. On April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated by a white man.
When the government broke the news, the people were devastated. He was one of their best hopes for equality.
Even with this loss, the fight for equality continues, and with the death of King, many racist people saw it as a sign to attack blacks.
They were attacked by dogs, beaten by police, and even sprayed with high-power water hoses.
Before the laws, there were no rules against these brutal attacks. Even if blacks were killed, the murderer would only pay a small fee.
But with the Civil Rights Acts, all black men, women, and children were equal to whites. If attacks went on, there were consequences.
This was why the march was so important to blacks. It meant they were accepted in society.
They no longer had to sit at the back of the bus, go to different churches, jobs, or schools, be ridiculed because of their color. They were equal.
This great change in American culture changed the way people looked at things.
They began to look beyond the color of skin, but rather the color of their kindness.
Time eventually led to the present day, where blacks are accepted and appreciated.
However, there is not full equality. Some still don't accept blacks into society, and in some countries, slavery is still in progress. Just like Martin Luther King Jr., people still have dreams about a brighter future and hope that one day the color of your skin won't matter at all.
And as we march our way to the future, less and less blacks are treated unfairly, as more and more people will treat others with respect.
Our hope is that we will remember our past and move above it. Each new day is a new chance for peace.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.